Good morning from WKYT News, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. I'm Bill Bryant, and Happy New Year. And later, Peter Baniak, the editor and publisher of the Lexington Herald-Leader, will join us. We'll look back at the unusual year of 2020 and look ahead to what could be next for Kentucky and for journalism. From the paper that recently left its landmark downtown location, Peter Baniak with us shortly. We'll also share some clips of Amber Philpott's interview this week with Governor Andy Beshear and First Lady Brittany Beshear. But first, State Auditor Mike Harmon is here with us. Harmon's team is concerned that Kentucky doesn't know exactly how much it owes for unemployment benefits. It comes at a time when the state legislature is about to put together a state budget. We'll talk about that and a couple of other topics with State Auditor Mike Harmon, a Republican who is from Danville and whose slogan has been "Follow the Data." Auditor Harmon, welcome. We appreciate you being with us today.
Good morning, Bill. It's great to be here with you, and Happy New Year.
And to you, thank you. Well, your team recently concluded an audit of the state's unemployment obligations and found what we understand to be a bit of a murky situation.
There's a little bit of inconsistencies. You know, Bill, every year the state publishes through the Kentucky, basically through the Kentucky Finance and Administration Cabinet, they publish what's known as the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And every year we audit to that report. And typically every year in the past, we have had what's known as an unmodified audit, which basically means it's kind of a clean audit. This year, when we were in the process of doing the audit on the CAFR, there was a determination that the information they were providing us specifically for the Unemployment Compensation Fund was inconsistent, and they were not able to verify. The numbers were kind of all over the board. Early on, they had told us the amount that they still owed to claimants was several hundred million. I think it was like 700 million. Then they told us $2 billion, and then finally they settled on a little over, I think, 511 million. So with those inconsistencies, them not truly knowing and not being able to support that numbers, we had to do what's known as a qualified opinion, which basically means that in that particular area, the other areas were fine other than the business type entity, which is the Unemployment Compensation Fund is contained within there. With the exception of those two, we were able to give a clean audit, but as a whole, we had to do a qualified opinion specifically for that particular concern. The other thing that we also noticed was that early on, during the pandemic, they had taken a lot of the stops off to try to, get checks out. But at the same time, what that caused was the opportunity for much more fraud because they weren't overseeing it. And we understand that they were extremely overwhelmed. It was a unique situation, and through the CARES Act, there were three major types of unemployment in addition to the traditional one.
So, we saw, as you said, the historic unemployment, and we all know that there were the lines and the complaints and the delays in people getting their benefits. Are you concerned, or are you saying that it is okay in this particular situation that some corners were cut in that effort to get checks to people quickly?
No, I'm not saying that it's okay. I do still have concerns. I mean, I still get, of course, I served 13 years in the Kentucky House before I became auditor back in 2015. So I still get people who have concerns, for constituent services. And I've still have had people reach out to me even just recently indicating they're still waiting for their unemployment from all the way back to March. And, I understand the system was overwhelmed, but really this is unacceptable. We need to make sure that people get their checks. And the other thing we need to do, we need to make sure we have accurate numbers. And the reason that is, one, because we obviously need people to have their checks, but also, the General Assembly is going back into session coming up here very soon in January. And it's important for them to have accurate information when they do that. And because it's a budget session, since the last session would normally be a budget session, but they only did a one-year budget, so they're doing the follow-up this year.
So, Mr. Auditor, this is what you know about unemployment because you looked at that very carefully in this case under this regular audit. Could there be other areas in this, nearly year-long state of emergency that has impacted Kentucky's ability to carefully watch its tax dollars with the federal money that has been flowing through, with the local governments doing what they have done with the funds that have come down?
Well, specifically in the CAFR, this was the one that we had the greatest concern. Obviously, there are probably others as well. And one of the things that I would encourage your viewers, this was our audit of the CAFR, but we will be releasing what we call the SWAC, the Statewide Single Audit of Kentucky, in the next couple of months. And when that occurs, what you will end up finding is that's where we show the testing we did and some of the items that we found during that testing. And I encourage people to watch that because there will be some additional findings for them to review at that time.
Has the pandemic itself affected your ability to get audits done? You couldn't get people necessarily into the locations you normally do. Maybe people were not available in those offices where you would go and look at records and ask questions.
We've been relatively blessed. Early on, even before the pandemic, we had started moving towards having people do telework at least one day a week. So it was easy to flip the switch pretty quickly. Obviously, there was a concern early on in being able to get enough information for them to continue to work. We worked through that logistics, and to be honest with you, we barely missed a beat. We've got a great team, and we just figured it out and moved forward with it.
Do you have priorities for the state legislature coming in? Oftentimes you have some things that loopholes you would like for them to close, or things that you would like to empower your office to do.
We do. We have what we call a reorganization bill. We made some changes by executive order that we would like to see codified, just basically helping the office be even more efficient than it is. But there's some other things. We've always looked at ways to try to help counties and states save money on their audit cost, and we've got another bill that we're looking at. Hopefully we can get through that will combine the different type of tax audits. There's multiple tax audits, whether it's unmined coal or gas and oil, or whether it's just your standard tax audit. We'd like to try to roll at least the audit process of that together, try to save them some cost on their audits.
When you hear something like the Brent Spence Bridge project, with emergency repair up there was $12 million. Apparently they got it done for about half of that. Does that gladden your heart to hear, or do you still need to look at some things with the project that came out of the blue like that?
Well, I think anytime that we can save money, it does gladden my heart. Our responsibility here at the auditor's office is just to make sure that the money was spent efficient, effective, and ethically. Within the complying to the laws that are currently on the books. But yes, it does my heart good if we only spend half of what we think it will.
In the year ahead, what are some key things people should be looking for from your office?
Well, as I said earlier, I think people should be looking towards the SWAC, the Statewide Single Audit of Kentucky. I think there'll be some additional findings that people will be interested in seeing. Of course, we do close to 600 audits a year on a regular basis. Everything from special exams to the statewide single audit, the CAFR we just talked about. So they just need to watch, and certainly I would encourage them to follow us on social media. And as you said earlier, we always talk about just following the data.
You are term limited in your present office, although you have about 3 more years to go. But there's been some stir that you're looking ahead to 2023, possibly considering a race for governor. Is that the case?
I'm looking heavily towards that. Of course, today I'm here speaking on behalf of the auditor's office as auditor, but yes, I'm looking heavily towards that. And certainly whenever I finalize a decision along that lines, we'll reach out to you and love to have another conversation.
You'd have other options, obviously, but it is apparently your intention to continue in elective office if the voters will have you, right?
If the voters will have me, and of course, like I said, we're looking heavily towards that particular office, and if we finalize on it, we will definitely let you know. But certainly, I've appreciated the support over the years. I've been auditor for now going on 5 years, and I served 13 years in the Kentucky General Assembly, and so I'm very thankful for those that have entrusted me with the state and with their needs.
It would be maybe some would consider it a leap to jump from the auditor's office to the governor's race. Do you see it that way?
Not necessarily. I've read several articles that auditors are probably best designed to be able to make that leap just because they have a greater understanding of the operations of government. but certainly we will see. I've jokingly said that you don't make a lot of friends as auditor, but I had a coach one time say that if you want friends, get a dog. So we do have a dog, but I do say that jokingly. But I think most people who know me know that we don't hurt anyone, we don't give anybody a pass. We just simply follow the data, and I carry those same type of ideals wherever I go.
State Auditor Mike Harmon, thanks for being with us. We do appreciate it very much.
Appreciate you, Bill.
Stay with us on Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be back. Lexington Herald-Leader editor and publisher Peter Baniak will join us next. We'll talk about the state of journalism in the Commonwealth and nationwide. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. What a time 2020 was for journalism nationwide and locally. Reporters had to innovate quickly and in many cases work from home to cover history. The pandemic dominated the headlines, so did civil unrest in the wake of the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And it was also very challenging for traditional news outlets as consumers found themselves bombarded with social media posts that they didn't know if they could trust. The news organizations came to realize that like never before, their brand and credibility were on the line with everything they reported. The Lexington Herald-Leader has covered news in the Bluegrass for 150 years. This last year has been one of change and challenge, including moving out of its landmark building at the edge of downtown Lexington. Peter Baniak is serving in the position now as the editor and general manager of the paper. He's been with the Herald-Leader for a quarter of a century himself, which I discovered through a column that he wrote a few weeks back. Peter, thanks for taking a little time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Quarter of a century makes me sound really old.
Doesn't it though?
Yeah.
How do you describe covering news and overseeing the covering of news in 2020 as that we were all keenly aware that we were living history?
This has just been the most extraordinary year of news that I've ever been associated with. Every year you sort of look at it and say, well, this was a historic year, or you can look at something and say that was a historic thing. But this year it was just nonstop. And sort of, if you think back to, March and how much things have changed in how we approach our job, and journalists can't, we have shifted entirely to remote work. We shifted to that almost immediately in March and stopped gathering in the newsroom, which is strange. Newsrooms are part of the lifeblood of newspapers, of TV news outlets, newsrooms are sort of where you gather and you have creative exchange of ideas. And so that was a huge shift for how we work and how we approach our jobs and how we collaborate. And all of that has had to shift to virtual. And be done virtually, like in a lot of offices, but it is very challenging for journalists who, are very much on the front lines of the news. So for things that we had to be out covering remotely, as I'm sure with you all, we had to be more conscious of safety than ever before, and making sure that we were keeping our visual journalists and our reporters safe. Making sure that we were providing them with equipment, which was particularly a challenge in March and April when that protective equipment was scarce.
There was just so much to cover. The spring and summer was such a confluence of issues with the pandemic, of course, and the pushback then to the closures that we saw and the unrest that we saw as issues were brought forth after the Breonna Taylor case came to light. How did you manage to keep your staff focused and really ready for anything?
Ready for anything is right. In addition to the two things you just mentioned, I mean, of course, you have the pandemic, which is sort of overarching everything, and it changes how you work, it changes how you cover the news. It is this constant flow of stories, and just when you think back to the summer and things started to seem to ebb a little bit in terms of the amount of cases, and then you have the second wave and now the third wave, and it's constantly changing and shifting, and it affects every aspect of life. And every aspect of the news that we cover, from politics to the restaurants that we cover, and the food and dining scene, or the entertainment scene, or arts and culture, to how we live our lives. And then, as you mentioned, you had nightly protests in May and June and July related to the Breonna Taylor case, and policing and questions of racial justice. And then you roll into the fall, and we have an election unlike an election, a national election unlike an election we've ever seen, and that continues. So it's just been one sort of continuous sort of big story on top of another big story on top of another big story. And I think it has been a real challenge. It's been times exhausting for our news staff. Not seeing each other makes it a challenge. Not seeing each other in person, coordinating, shifting all of our news meetings to digital, using the tools that are available to us like Slack to try to communicate more, but and to communicate in real time. It is required a real shift in how we think, how we communicate, how we approach the news. We just had our virtual holiday party last week. It's those sorts of things that you don't sort of think about how much you miss being together in person.
Peter, how does a traditional news organization such as your own and others with a good name to protect survive in a time when people are seeing 3-line reports on Twitter or social media, rumor mongering on the internet goes around, and many call the mainstream media fake news? How do you operate in that environment?
You operate by providing information that is that sort of stands out above the noise, if you will, that is verified, that is reported, that is credible. I think we and you've seen this time and time again over the last several years. You provide the truth and the facts and the reporting to back it up. It is challenging, more challenging now than ever, to sort of stand out above all that noise. And people can, through social media, sort of set up their own self-selecting bubbles of information if they want to. But I think, particularly at a time like this, in a crisis like this, people turn to us. They turn to names, credible names, for reporting that they could trust. About what was going on, because things were changing so quickly throughout the year and continue to do so. As things were shutting down, and you see, I'm really proud of the work that my staff has done. I think they have done extraordinary work this year in an extraordinary time under really difficult conditions. I think they've put themselves on the line, they put their safety on the line at times, to be out there letting people know what is actually going on, and to provide them with facts and data and useful information. But I think there are other great examples throughout Kentucky, and probably one of the best is the Cynthiana Democrat. When if you think back to the very early stages of the pandemic, when there was one of the first outbreaks was in Harrison County in Kentucky, and that very small paper there, published a special section that they distributed for free to everyone in the county, full of information about what they needed to know. For their own health.
That's quite a public service.
Yeah, I think that you've seen some extraordinary work, and we and other newspapers, we lowered our paywall on a lot of news about the pandemic and the coronavirus, because it's a huge public service, and we approach the story that way.
Well, Peter, let me ask you this: news organizations have to be torn between reporting what people want to know and what they need to know. In this case, in the case of the pandemic, oftentimes it's been both. But a celebrity story may get all the clicks, while a budget matter at City Hall or the state capitol can be dry. But how important is it to serve up what matters along with what grabs the attention?
I think it's really important, and I think the coronavirus coverage of this and the nonstop nature of it has really shown that. I mean, people have responded to our coverage in a really, to me, encouraging way. I think they see the value of that coverage, and that's everything from providing the information about the daily updates to personal protective equipment, to the rules as they change, to doing things like on our site. We provided and still have a guide to as restaurants are suffering through this really difficult time, to who's providing takeout and how does that work? And I think people have responded to that. We've seen our digital subscriber grow throughout the year, and I think that shows to me that people want that information. They want verified, reported journalism that that is credible.
Let me ask this, change is constant. I remember the 1983 merger of the Lexington Herald and the Lexington Leader, a morning and afternoon newspapers, combining there into one. That big production facility that was at Main and Midland for all of those years, the newspaper's home for 4 decades. You've moved out of there now. I know that there was a lot of nostalgia when that happened. What is next for the Herald-Leader in terms of a physical presence where people might know that it's the headquarters of the newspaper?
Right. I guess the first thing I would say is I just want to be really, really clear. We are not going anywhere. And I know that I've gotten some queries from people when they see the news about us moving out of the building. We are still here. We are still in Lexington. We are not going anywhere. We plan to continue to report the news and provide advertising information in Lexington, Central and Eastern Kentucky for a good long time. Our reporters are still, and our advertising folks are working from home. I'm working from home for now. I would expect, we're going to be looking for new office space sometime in 2021 when it's safe to gather people together again. I expect us to continue to be a strong and important journalistic presence here for a long time to come.
Do you consider that is it likely there will be a printed product for some time to come, or does it at some point go all digital?
It's hard to say. We've seen in the last 2 years, enormous growth of people who are digital only subscribers, which has been really encouraging to see. But there are now so many ways for people to get the news from us. There's print. People can get it on our website, Kentucky.com. There are a lot of people who read the e-edition, which is an exact electronic replica of the printed newspaper. Obviously, there's social media and our social media channels. There's so many, we have tens of thousands of people who subscribe to our email newsletters to get the news directly in their inbox. So there are so many ways for people to get that information. We've reached so many readers now than say we did in the mid 90s. Our print numbers, yes, we have fewer people who get print only, but there are still tens of thousands of people who rely on that printed product.
Right. Well, future will tell, right? Peter Baniak, thank you so much. He runs the Lexington Herald-Leader, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
And stay with us in just a moment. We will hear from Governor Beshear and First Lady Brittany Beshear here on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. WKYT's Amber Philpott had a chance this week to catch up with Governor Andy Beshear and First Lady Brittany Beshear after this year that nobody could have imagined. The pandemic has been life-changing for everybody, including those trying to lead the Commonwealth through it.
Well, as we talk about Christmas, Governor, you have called the vaccine that we now have in this state a Christmas miracle. You both received that early gift before the holidays. I want to start with why it was important for you both as the first family to be vaccinated, and what message did you hope that you sent to Kentuckians?
So for months, I've been telling people that once this vaccine was available, that I would take it in front of the cameras to show people that it's safe. And not only did I take it, but Brittany took it as well, which I hope shows people that this vaccine is a miracle. It is safe, it is highly effective, and it's going to help us defeat this virus. Now, we need to make sure that we can get 75+% of all Kentuckians vaccinated. So that means we've got to build the confidence out there. And I hope that by Brittany and I being willing to take this, we've shown people that not only are we going to say it's safe, but we're going to prove that it's safe by taking it ourselves.
This question is for you both. This time last year, you were both settling into your roles as governor and first lady. If you had to sum up this first year in office in just a word, what would it be for each of you? And explain that to me.
I think surprising is a good word, because we have had a lot of curveballs thrown at us as a family and as a Commonwealth. And so how we dealt with those things as they came along you know, everything from school shutting down to restaurants shutting down to friends and family becoming COVID positive, having scares ourselves and trying to talk through what would happen with our kids who were really scared. So I think, you know, one of the great things that has come out of this is how resilient our kids have shown us they are, and how they are able to adapt to changes around them, to the life that they're used to having. So I think surprising.
I'd say it's been humbling. Now, I thought I knew what this job was. My dad having served for 8 years, and then 3 months into my term, the pandemic starts. It's been humbling because this virus and what it does, what we still don't know about it, and what we didn't know about it, especially in March and April. But it's also been humbling to see the people of Kentucky and what good people we are, how we're willing to come together, how we're willing to sacrifice. I mean, there was a day when a 9-year-old girl sent me her allowance for the Team Kentucky Fund because she wanted to help other people around her. I mean, that's really humbling. It's really special.
And that is Kentucky Newsmakers. We want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. You make it a good week ahead.